Hey, what's up, YouTube family? It's K right here, back with another good video for you guys. Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick video as I did read in the boxing news media that Jake Paul wants to fight Canelo in the next 3 years. And I'm going to make a video response on why that's a bad idea. So yeah, let's talk about it. For those of you that don't know, Jake Paul, he is a professional boxer according to him, but he is a YouTube sensation. Makes a lot of dumb YouTube videos. Don't really watch him that much. Along with his brother Logan Paul, who is another dumbass YouTuber. As I will never forget, Logan Paul went to a Japanese suicide forest and I believe he videotaped a dead man committing, or he videotaped a man committing suicide, and he decided to get millions of views for it, and he decided to not take that shit down. So for those of you that know Logan Paul or have seen his videos, that explains the personality that he brings to the table along with his brother Jake Paul. And I know the two dipshits, they live in Puerto Rico, so I would hope one day they would get kicked out because they serve no purpose being there and they're absolute dickheads, anyway. So it's like I don't understand why the hell they even like run their mouth, and yet, they're extremely wealthy guys trying to basically flex, their clout to act like that, nobody can't touch them. But either way, that's besides the point. Jake Paul, for those of you that don't know, called out Canelo Alvarez, said to him that he is willing to fight Canelo, hopefully in the next three years, if I'm not mistaken. So Jake Paul decided to say that in a previous interview in the past. I believe it was with ESPN on the Skip Bayless show or some shit like that. And like all hype jobs, Skip Bayless decided to hype up Jake Paul to say, "Oh, well, maybe he could possibly defeat Canelo Alvarez. He could have those skills to defeat Canelo. Just take a look at who he's training with, blah blah blah, and he could have that mentality to go in there and beat him, blah blah blah." And it's like, Skip Bayless, for those of you that don't know, this is what the same dipshit that said Floyd Mayweather was afraid of Manny Pacquiao and he ducked Manny Pacquiao, and yet he retracted on those statements when Manny Pacquiao said that it was his fault for not, accepting the terms with Floyd Mayweather in the first negotiations before, the second negotiations came, and then Team Pacquiao decided to open up to say it was their fault from the very beginning for not accepting all the terms to be agreed, aka accepting to Olympic style drug testing that Floyd Mayweather wanted for Pacquiao to make the fight with him, and Pacquiao decided to not take the fight, and then Skip Bayless used that as a excuse to push towards Floyd Mayweather to say that he still ducked Manny Pacquiao, knowing that Pacquiao ducked Floyd Mayweather in the first contract negotiation. So that shows how mentally fucking retarded Skip Bayless is and how racist he is as a person himself. But when it comes to a white fighter, especially a white YouTube sensation like Jake Paul, Skip Bayless will do the same exact thing but twist it against Canelo Alvarez to say, "Oh, well, he could be that next guy to be the great white hope to defeat Canelo Alvarez. Just take a look at how hard he trains in the gym, blah blah blah." Like all the bullshit he says, he just runs it out of his mouth. And good enough that Stephen A. Smith, he just shits on him. He just says, you have to be out of your mind to think that Canelo is gonna get defeated by Jake Paul. But good enough that Stephen A. Smith, even though he's a Sambo piece of shit, he said on one of the ESPN live commentaries to say towards Jake Paul, that he needs to face actual boxers. He needs to face guys with muscle memory, face a good opponent that gives you a good test and pushes you to your limits or above your limits. And not one person ever criticized him on that, or at least maybe like Canelo Alvarez dick writers or Jake Paul dick writers, whoever Like, whoever would say, ah, nah, Jake Paul, he's a bum, so let him continue to fight bums. No, I mean, if you're gonna get into the sport of boxing, you should be facing tough opposition. That's what the sport is built out of, and that's how you should treat the sport with, with respect. But, according to idiots like Skip Bayless or other news media that likes to hype up Jake Paul, they'll just run with the narrative to say, oh, Jake Paul, he could beat Canelo, blah, blah, blah. This kid, he's like the next greatest big thing if he works hard, blah, blah, blah. No. As much as I fucking hate Canelo Alvarez till the day I die, and I don't give a shit about his fans, Canelo Alvarez will whoop that. Yeah, he will. No, he won't just whoop Jake Paul. He'll murder Jake Paul. And he even said it as of recently to say, you better watch your mouth. I will kill you if I ever fight you. And I'm only just paraphrasing that because Canelo, he doesn't say that much about Jake Paul, but he gave a huge stern warning to Jake to say, that, he's going to put him inside the hospital. And that, I do believe that because Canelo's been fighting since he was like a little kid. And he's been in the pros since he was 15 years old, knocking grown ass men out in Mexican local boxing fights before he made it to the big stage in America. And then here he is now fighting bum after bum, even though he's still one of the best fighters coming out of Mexico. But let's just be honest here. Canelo Alvarez is 31 years old. Just recently turned 31, I believe. A couple months back. I'm not too sure, but Canelo Alvarez is a big ass puncher. Not a day in Jake Paul's life will he ever hurt Canelo. Unless Canelo Alvarez gets into some, freak miracle accident where he survives and he's not like the same fighter anymore. Maybe Jake can crack him and beat him. Or if Canelo, he gets into some, crazy, undisciplined drug scandal that, he starts to be, irresponsible in his training camps and he's, fucking up his body with, drinking and drinking alcohol and doing, doing dumb shit, like what people do when they make it to the top in boxing, like Mike Tyson. Then yeah, then there's a possibility for that. But I don't really see that out of Canelo. Canelo, he's a very disciplined fighter. He always stays inside the gym, and I don't really see something like that coming out of Canelo unless he loses focus in his career and then he starts going through, the Mike Tyson effect. But I don't see that out of him. He is at the top of his career. Canelo is definitely in his prime at 31 years old, and by the time when that happens, he'll probably be 34 and maybe close to 35. I don't know like what age Jake Paul is looking to face him at. He'll definitely be in his like late, or he'll be like 20, at least 27, right? Yeah, 27, something like that. I don't fucking know. I know he's not that far away from me in age, so I'm 26. He's about 24, I think. But no, like if Jake Paul wants to, have like a death wish against Canelo, let him have it. But as a hardcore boxing fan, I would say no to it. But that's just coming out of like my good side. But out of my evil side, I would say, yeah, go right ahead. I'd like to see Jake get his ass pulverized and almost killed inside the boxing ring by a big heavy-handed puncher like Canelo. And Canelo, he's no joke. I don't see how a guy like Jake Paul could really hurt somebody like Canelo, who's been inside the game ever since he was a teenager. And despite his opposition that he's been fighting over the years, Canelo is still one of the most deadliest fighters to fight. And I would never think for a second that anybody that would bet money against Canelo in a Jake Paul fight would ever think that Canelo would get clipped and knocked out by Jake. And then again, Jake, he's only been boxing for almost about 2 years, right? So it's like he's technically just been fighting bums his last, or in all of his fights leading up to Tyron Woodley, which is questionable if Tyron Woodley could be the first man to give him a real test, which I don't think that's going to happen. but it'll be interesting to see where things go. I don't know, but either way, I don't ever see Jake Paul really making it that far in boxing. He's just using it to clout chase, and a Canelo fight down the road would probably be the dumbest thing ever. Even if a sanctioning body were to give him the opportunity where Canelo decided to have a title and he voluntarily took Jake Paul for a title defense that he wanted to do towards Jake, no, I don't ever see that happening. Probably after Canelo doesn't have a title, he'll just take Jake Paul as like a farewell fight, and he'll just fuck around with him, and then he'll probably knock him out in like 6 or 8 rounds. I'd probably say 4 rounds, just to be generous, because Canelo, he'll still be a very dangerous fighter, even towards like the end of his career. But Jake Paul does not stand a chance against Canelo, and this is coming from a Canelo Alvarez critic and a hater of him. I don't have too much respect for Canelo inside the ring, but I mean outside the ring, he seems like a chill guy that I would have a good conversation with. But no, my message to Jake Paul is that you should never even think about stepping inside the ring with Canelo. Canelo Alvarez has been in there with the toughest opposition. Well, not with the toughest opposition, but you kind of get what I'm saying. He's been semi battle tested by guys like Arislandi Lara, getting his ass beat by Floyd Mayweather for 12 rounds, getting his butt whooped by Austin Trout in a very close fight that he got a robbery victory over. Been to war with Triple G in two extremely tough fights. Been to war with Miguel Cotto's brother that almost stopped him. Uh, yeah, so Canelo, he's definitely been up there. I definitely give Canelo his props for beating some decent names, but for you, Jake Paul, to ever even think about facing Canelo at 3 years down the line, I don't ever see that fight happening. And if it does happen, you better hope Canelo has some sympathy for you inside the ring, because he's gonna maul Jake Paul like it's a Mortal Kombat film. That's how deadly I think of Canelo when he punches somebody. It may not look like it, because Canelo, he's more of a boxer. He's more of a pressure inside. Yeah, he's more of a pressure brawler puncher. He can definitely box, but Canelo's Alvarez feet is so slow, so he knows how to use defensive inside pressure fighting. And well, I wouldn't even say his defense is that good, but you can see what Canelo's trying to do. He has like a semi emulated style of Mike Tyson, but he uses that Juan Manuel Marquez. Like, he uses peekaboo, and then he catches that one punch that someone tries to throw, and then he works downstairs and then upstairs with his counter punching. So he's he's more of like a power punching counter puncher. He's a power defensive counter puncher. But that's really what he is. He's a defensive counter pressure puncher, or a pressure fighter. And that's what I like out of Canelo's style in a way, because it may seem like it's easy to break him down, but when you kind of think about it, Canelo uses his upper body strength to make people feel uncomfortable. And I think Sean Porter is a little bit similar to Canelo in that same light, not physically, because Sean Porter is different from Canelo, but I mean, if Sean Porter and Canelo were to fight on the same night, you would you would definitely see Sean Porter being next to Canelo, and Canelo would have shades with Sean Porter along with Mike Tyson, which that's what I like out of Canelo, because if he actually worked on footwork and defense a lot more to be slick and to be quick inside the ring, then Canelo, he would be awesome. And I would say, yeah, Canelo could definitely be even with Charlo and Andrade and Benavidez, and he could most definitely stop all three of those guys. But if anything, he would have a close ass fight with them, and that could possibly go to a split decision where he could possibly lose or win those fights. But Canelo don't want to do that, because he's ducking all three of the all three of those dangerous fighters, because Canelo don't want to get his ass whooped. But when you look at his style, his style is almost kind of pretty dangerous enough for anyone to try to trade with Canelo because Canelo, that's what his style is. His style is to go in the inside, break you down, and then when he clips you, he just beats the crap out of everyone. And that's the good thing that I like out of Canelo because Canelo, he knows how to defensively hard counter someone, in the inside. But when it's a outside, mix it up type of battle, Canelo, he can't, he can't fuck with anybody that outpaces him and outmoves him with a jab. Because when he gets beat to that jab, Canelo's done. Canelo cannot have, the same amount of footwork applied to his opponents that are more defensively slick and more defensively agile than him. But that's why Canelo is very smart of cutting off the ring in certain cases with fighters that he knows he can beat because they're just tailor-made fighters like Billy Joe Saunders and who else? Yeah, I would just say Billy Joe Saunders. I mean, Billy Joe Saunders gave him a lot of trouble, but when you look at the Saunders fight, Saunders was not even like a good southpaw. He didn't use his abilities all the way. But if Canelo actually faced like Andrade and Charlo or Benavidez, though, like those guys would give him a much difficult fight. But Canelo, if he had more footwork and he had more defensive methodology with his inside pressure fighting, he can easily give a tough fight to all three of those guys, if not possibly win those fights. But Canelo, he doesn't have balls to face those guys because he's already surrendered to them, by not fighting them. But for Jake Paul, I would stay away from Canelo. Canelo Alvarez is just getting better, and even if Canelo decides to fight Jake Paul, I personally don't see that fight going past 2-3 rounds. It probably would just end in one round, just to be honest, because Canelo, he's such a deadly puncher. Every time he hits you, he just takes more, he takes more mentality away from you to win the fight. And I don't ever see Jake Paul even getting better in 3 years. I don't think his level of opposition proves that he could beat a guy like Canelo. But even if Canelo were to fight Jake Paul at a bigger weight, Canelo would still be, like the more heavily favorited fighter to hurt Jake Paul a lot more than Jake Paul hitting Canelo. But as far as skills wise, Canelo beats Jake. Jake is a good, power puncher, I would say. He's really sloppy with his overhands and his hooks, to say the least. I mean, he has a good right hand, but other than that, Jake Paul still has a lot to work on. I mean, if he really wants to get good and actually have some chance to beat Canelo, he needs to face top level opposition, and maybe that could give you a chance to beat him. But I don't ever see that happening because Jake Paul, he only joined the sport of boxing just to clout chase, and you could see that in all three of his fights with his opposition that he chose. They were all tailor made for him to defeat them. And I mean, 2 out of 3 of them don't know how to box, but the other one, which was Anderson Gibb, that was the other YouTuber that he knocked out. I think he had like a little bit of amateur experience, but he's never been in a pro fight. He's never been in there with some pro fighters per se. Yeah, Vidal Riley was his trainer and he is a pro fighter, but that doesn't really help him grow as a fighter. And I think Jake Paul, he's yet to be tested with a real boxer. And I think like a real fighter like Kendall Gill, even though he's an old man, he would give him problems. Or if he were to face guys in his own, you know, yeah, in his own division, I believe he fights at cruiserweight. If he fought like a guy like, Trishan Kalkruth, that one kid that fights on DAZN, he would definitely stop Jake Paul. Even if he wants to fight guys like, I mean, there's plenty of guys in in his own division that would stop him, but he obviously needs to just face top level guys, and that'll show to the world if he's good or not. But he would get stopped by plenty of opponents that would possibly stop Jake Paul. Probably Anthony Durrell, Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, most definitely. Who else? I would have Artur Beterbiev. He would beat the shit out of him. Dmitry Bivol would wash him. There's probably a good number of opponents that have way better experience than Jake Paul that would give him, a fight of his life, even though that he's a cruiserweight. But either way, I don't ever see Jake really going that far. But I just wanted to kind of cover on this video because it's somehow trending on YouTube, so I just wanted to get put some exposure on this and you know just put my 2 cents in. But no, I have Canelo brutally stopping Jake. That will be probably one of the quickest victories for Canelo Alvarez. But I don't ever see Canelo giving Jake any breathing room. He's gonna pressure him, and Jake is not going to handle his punches, and Jake is going to break down crying like a little baby back bitch. So that's pretty much what I gotta say. Let me know what y'all think. Do you think Jake Paul has a chance to beat Canelo Alvarez? Um, I'm pretty sure most of y'all will say no, but it's good to have videos like this. I like drama videos, especially in sports. But I got Canelo beating the crap out of Jake, sending him back to crappy ass California or Cleveland, Ohio, like wherever the hell he's from. But yeah, that's pretty much what I gotta say. Let me know what you guys think of this possible fight in the future. This is Kieran Rodriguez signing out, and I'll see ya. Bye.